Hey everybody, and welcome to week 11. We are now entering unit 3, and in this unit we're not going to be learning much new stuff, and we're really going to be drilling down into our chords and scales. You know, when I was younger and taking piano lessons, sometimes I might not practice before a lesson, and I would go in to my teacher and be like, well, I didn't practice this week, but I know about chords and scales and I understand them, I get it, right? So, you know, it's okay that I can't do it. And she would always impress upon me that actually, you know, it is important to understand the concept of chords and scales and the circle of fifths. But when it comes down to performing on your instrument, you've got to be able to do it, right? So understanding it is only a small part of the process, but putting our hands on our instrument and really absorbing these concepts and expanding them across the instrument is really important. So Unit 3 is really going to be focusing on expanding our scales. We're going to be doing our 2-octave scales, and then every week we're going to be flipping. So this week we're going to be looking at 2-octave scales, and then next week we're going to be diving deeper into our chords, and we're going to be doing something called inversion blending, which is also known as voice leading, where we're going to see how we can really blend chords together and work with them. But without further ado, today we're also going to do our rhythm warm-up. We're going to be doing it at a little bit faster tempos. And then for our sight reading, we're going to be looking at a piece I wrote in 6/8 time. All right, so let's head on over to the drum and get warmed up. All right, let's get started with our week 11 rhythm warm-up. This is the beginning of Unit 3, and as promised, we are going to speed our tempos up just a bit today. So we're going to start with line 1, as usual, on the downbeats, but now we're going to be starting at 50 BPM. So let's go ahead and get the metronome started and look at line 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, and 2, and switch your hands. 1, and 2, 3, and 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, and 2, and top line hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent. Okay. So now we're going to move on to line 2. The metronome is going to be on the upbeats now, and we're going to speed it up to 55. Let's get started. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and switch your hands. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and top line hands together. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent. Okay, now we're going to be going at 60 BPM. We're going to put the metronome on half time, so we're just going to cut that in half and put it down to 30. And we're going to imagine that the click is the first and the third upbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch your hands. 1, and 2, and 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top one hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Getting through this exercise quick, right? Almost like 10 beats per minute faster. And so that brings us to our last line here, line 4, and we will speed it up to 35 BPM, or 35 BPM on the metronome. That means that we are going to be going at a nice, comfortable 70 BPM. And we will now hear the metronome on the upbeat of 2 and 4. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Okay, now before we get back to the piano, a couple things. Remember, if you're having trouble at going at fast tempos, don't feel like you have to do that. One of the beauties is that you can download all of these rhythmic warm-ups from my website, pianodojo.com, and you can practice them at any speed you need, all right? Now remember, if 70 feels like it's fast to you, most metronomes have an actual Italian tempo marking underneath that, and 70 BPM is marked as andante moderato, which means a moderate walking pace, right? So although we've been going very slow, and now we're going faster, we're actually not going that fast in the grand scheme of music. We're only up to a moderate walking pace with our tempos. So, keep that in mind, because sometimes when you are thinking something is very fast, you can trick yourself out and have more trouble than you need to be having. But anyways, nice work, and let's get back on over to the piano now. All right, now that we're all warmed up, let's dive into these 2 octave scales that we have here in front of us. Now I added some color coding, so you can see that the trick to 2 octave scales is that we are always just alternating between 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and when you end the scale, you can throw your pinky in there instead of having to cross over again, right? And once you can do 2 octaves, there's really nothing holding you back from 3 octaves and 4 octaves, all right? Now, you can also see on C major, I went ahead and showed you that your middle fingers are going to be lining up every time. So that's a good roadmap for keeping your orientation when you're going all the way up and down these scales. All right, and so let's go ahead and check these out on the keyboard. Okay, so an important thing to remember when we're doing this, all right, is that as we're going up and crossing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't want to swing our elbows out or twist our wrist. You can bring your thumb under, right, just a little bit as you're going, but you really want to be just moving your entire hand and arm. It's much more efficient to go like this than it is to go like this, right? So let's check out C major. We're going to look at our right hand first. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then of course we come back down, smoothing it out this time. Let's try that with our left hand. And of course, hands together. There we go. And honestly, C major is probably one of the harder scales to do that on, because when you have just all white keys, you can't really feel around for any road markers or anything like that. And so in these next couple scales, it's actually going to be easier, because as we start to add the black keys, it's going to give you a little bit more of a reference for where you are in the scale. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out G major. We'll start with our right hand. And then our left hand. And of course, hands together. Excellent. Now, for the sake of time in these videos, I am doing them at a nice medium pace, but if you need to slow down, go as slow as you need and take as long as you need. Sometimes this can take up to a week before you really get comfortable with this. So if you're not immediately going as fast as me, don't panic. All right, take your time. That's what this is all about. And now my favorite scale, I honestly think that D major is the easiest of the white key scales, because especially for your right hand, there's always a black note underneath your third or your fourth, which are your crossing fingers, right? So let's take a look at our right hand first. And then our left hand. And finally, let's put it hands together. There we go. All right, now if you need a little bit more of a challenge, feel free to try out your relative minor scales with 2 octaves. So in this case, that would be A minor, E minor, and B minor. All right, but now we're going to take a look at today's sight reading. All right, so here we have circle, circle, dot, dot. It is in the time signature of 6/8. And what that means is, if you look at the 6 right here, that means that we have 6 of something in every measure. And if you want to know what that something is, you look at the bottom number, which is an 8. So that means we have 6 eighth notes in every measure, all right? Now, here's the thing. It's not like 4/4 where we literally count every beat and feel that like 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because 6/8 is what's known as a compound meter, all right? Because what we really do is we go up a layer and we feel at a higher level. We feel this in groups of 3. And because there's 2 groups of 3, 6/8 ends up feeling kind of like 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the thing is that in music, there are 2 basic kinds of feelings, all right? We've been going over one of them extensively in our rhythmic warm-ups, and that is the up-down feeling, the 2 feeling, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But you can also have a circular feeling, which is when you have that 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? Now the thing is, we actually will be extensively going over that 3 feel, that circular subdivision, in our rhythmic warm-ups about halfway through this series, and we're almost there, okay? So today is an introduction, but like many things, the first time you're introduced to it, it might not click. But don't fret, because we will extensively be going over this in our rhythmic warm-ups soon enough, all right? Now, before we actually get our hands on this, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the harmonies. So as you can see with our key signature, we have 2 flats. So if we C, F, B flat on our circle of fifths, we're in the key of B flat, all right? And as you can see down here, we have a very common type of 6/8 shape, which is the dotted quarter note, because think about it, a dotted note gets half of its original value added to it. So this is 3/8 notes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're going to see a lot of dotted quarter notes in 6/8, and we can also see that we have a pretty basic chord shape right here. We have the B flat chord shape, so you don't really need to hunt down those lines and pick out what they are, because you can see that that's a pretty obvious chord shape. Now, I did put some fingering suggestions down here because we will be lifting that F up to a G, all right? But we're going to go ahead and call these first four measures the 1. There we go. So we've got our 1. And then down here we can see we have another chord shape that is underneath the B flat. And think about when we were going over our relative minors, do down to la, right? And so we have our relative minor here. And so we'll look at our 6 right there. Now we have a pretty cool little harmonic surprise going on next. So let's talk about what's going on, and the best way when you're talking about a interesting harmonic surprise is to work our way backwards, okay? So we're going to take a look starting right here, because as you can see, this is where we return to our 1 chord down here at the bottom on the bottom line. So we'll put our 1 there, and we're going to work our way backwards, okay? Now, what is the most common thing to lead to the 1? The 5, right? Do we have a 5 here? Absolutely. We can see that we have that F chord, that open F chord right there. And in fact, we even have the 5/7 because we do have an E flat right here, and that is the 7th note of the F chord. Again, we will be going over these soon enough in the next unit, actually. In unit 4, we'll be going over our 7th note, our 7th chords finally. But if we back it up even further, we can see that we still have our 5 chord right here. And then that brings us to our mystery chord. All right, now we know that this is F. And then we see a couple sharps here, so that must mean that this is F sharp. But clearly, F sharp is nowhere near to B flat in this key, right? If B flat is up here on the circle, F sharp or G flat, right, is down here at 6 o'clock. So they're not closely related. So how did we decide to get that, all right? And the way we did is something called a tritone substitution. Now, we learned about tritones in our last unit. It's that interval, it's the devil's interval. It's 6 half steps away from whichever note you start on, right? And the cool thing about tritones is that you can actually replace a chord with its tritone, okay? So what would really go well right here, if you're thinking about the circle of fifths and you're thinking about dominoes falling to B flat, if we back it up one more, so we have B flat, we have F, and we have C, right? So a good solid circle of fifths progression would be C, which would in this key would be the 2, then you'd have your 5, and then you'd have your 1. The 2, 5, 1. It's that perfect circle of fifths motion. The 2, 5, 1 is a very popular progression. There are whole books being written on it. And we will talk about the 2, 5, 1. But if you think about the key of C, and its tritone is F sharp, all right? So what we do is we replace the C with its tritone. So we have F sharp, and that is a tritone substitution. Now, the tritone substitution may sound complicated, but it's actually meant to illustrate something very simple. And that is that instead of going from our G up to the C and then back down to the F, what that allows us to do is actually go from our G down a half step to F sharp and then down to F. So the beauty of the tritone substitution, although it may sound like a very ugly theoretical concept, is actually to make things easier because it gives us half step motion, which is much easier than lifting your hand all the way up to C, right, in this case. All right, and so now let's go ahead and talk about the ending here. As you can see, we're going to just stay on this 1 chord for the rest of this. All right, and we will be raising our octaves each time. And in fact, when you see these dotted lines right here that say 8VA, what that means is that everything underneath that dotted line is going to be taken up one octave. So here we had this motif, this idea. Then we wrote that idea up one octave. We literally wrote it up an octave, but then we ran out of space, right? We don't want to be using ledger lines up in the stratosphere. So one easier technique is to write the same thing, but put the 8VA symbol above it, and that makes it a little bit more readable on the paper, okay? So let's go ahead and play that and see what it feels like, just the left hand, all right? So what we've got is we have our left hand in our B flat position, we have our correct fingers being used, and it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we go down to the G. Now don't forget we have E flats. There it is. There's our tritone sub in that easy half step. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now back to the beginning. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 6. Up an octave. One more octave. Easy enough, right? Now, let's take a look at our right hand, all right? So this is a nice little quarter note, eighth note. We're going to feel that 6/8 feel, that round feeling, and it's going to go something like this. Now, you use the fingers that I suggested, and it will make it much easier, all right? So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Again. Up an octave. One more. All right, there we go. Now, let's put this hands together. And there we have it. Excellent, excellent. All right, now one little more theoretical thing here, all right? Because maybe some of you caught this, but if we look right here, when you hear this sound, it doesn't sound exactly like a 5. It kind of does because the 5 is in the bass. But if you really look at the right hand, you can notice that we have more of a B flat thing going on there. So it's almost like the B flat is being put on top of the 5. It's almost like a polychord, right? A B flat over an F, which in this case, all right, is what we would call the cadential 6/4, the 1-6-4. All right. Now here's the deal. It's basically like a 1 chord in second inversion. Because if you think about B flat, here's first inversion, here's second inversion, right, with the F on the bottom. And so in some ways, when the 1 chord is being put into a second inversion, classically it behaves a little bit more like a type of a 5, because usually when you have that resolves to a 5, which you can see that in the right hand, those notes resolve very nicely, and then that always leads us back to the 1. So sometimes it's pretty interesting, right, that the 1 is capable of behaving more like a 5. Now, I'll put a link to some theory about this in the comments and in the show notes about the cadential 6/4 if you want to read more about it. But it's a way of suspending the 5 It's a way of getting the 1 to behave like a 5. And it's a way to sort of add some drama before the 5, right? So we have our tritone substitution, we have a 1 behaving like a 5, then we finally have our 5/7 to our 1, a cool little harmonic thing that has been going on. These techniques have been being used since classical times. You can see this being used in jazz and even in ragtime with Scott Joplin. But anyways, there we have it, all right? So Unit 3, starting off here, we got some 6/8. We're going to be doing our 2 octave scales. Next week, we'll be looking at inversion blending. And remember, you can download this sheet music, the rhythmic warm-ups, and all the documents that you see at my website, pianodojo.com, right? And until next time, happy practicing.